And when the police of the city would approach the shore where my rabbi spoke, then Simon and Jacob would ply the oars mightily, and they would take the boat into the midst of the sea, whither they could not follow him. And they would do thus also. They would take the many boats of their mother, and load them with people, and take them into the sea to follow our rabbi. And we would prepare bread and other food in the boats, with the money given us by Johanna and Susanna and other devout women. And the rabbi and the multitude would pass in their boats to another shore of Gennesaret, perchance by Bet Zaida, or some other spot that was empty of people. And we would descend there and spread ourselves upon the green field. And there were times when we went among ruins and hid ourselves among the vineyards which are upon the shore. And the rabbi sat in the midst of the people, and broke bread with them, and taught them the ways of God, and proclaimed the coming of the kingdom of heaven. And he taught them what they were to do, that they might inherit the world to come, and be worthy of a portion in the kingdom of heaven. And sometimes he would heal a sick man with herbs, and sometimes only by the laying on of his hands. And he brought calmness to the stormy of spirit, and comforted the fallen, and remitted the sins of sinners. And the people clung to him, and he was as one body and one soul with them. And the faith of Simon Bar-Jonah in our rabbi grew stronger from day to day. And he came to believe that our rabbi could do those things which no man of flesh and blood had ever done before, and that the power had been given to him not only over men, but over the spirits and the forces of the world and the elements thereof, and that angels stood ready to do his bidding. And Simon saw visions and heard voices which none other saw or heard. And the following thing came to pass. We had left our rabbi alone by the edge of the sea, for he had told us that he would pray alone. And we went off a distance into the sea on our boats, and we were to return later for him. And in the meantime the night came, and there was a mist as of dew on the water, and the mist hid the lights of heaven, and it seemed to us that earth and heaven had become molten together, and were as one body. And the darkness was thick, so that we could not see the prow of the boat, and our rowers felt their way in the darkness. And the sons of Zebedee, who were the rowers, said, Come, let us return to the shore where we have left our teacher, for it is late. And Simon Bar-Jonah and the other disciples were in our boat, and we were uneasy in spirit for our rabbi, for the sea had changed her face. Then of a sudden we heard the cry of Simon Bar-Jonah, who called in a fright, Look, behold! And we looked into the night, but the darkness hid everything from us, as if a net were hung before our eyes, and we saw nothing save the thickness around us. And we asked in terror, Simon Bar-Jonah, what seest thou? Say. And Simon Bar-Jonah pointed into the thickness of the cloud which covered the world, and he cried, I see my rabbi, and he filleth the space of the world, and his head is lifted unto the stars, and he walketh with naked feet on the waves, and the waves lie at his feet like sheep, and let him tread upon them. And we strained our gaze into the darkness, but the darkness lay like a buckler of steel upon the water, and we no longer saw each other, but heard only the voice of Simon Bar-Jonah, which ceased not from calling, Behold, he walketh, he goeth before us. And we believed the words, for the terror of the Lord had come upon us. And on a certain day our rabbi went out with some of his disciples and a great multitude upon the sea, and they came to a shore and landed there, as his custom was, to break bread. And some of the disciples, I, Judah, remained among them, remained at home, in charge of the vessels. And the night came, and the rabbi and the other disciples and the multitude returned not, and we went down to the shore to await them. And a storm arose on the waters, and it smote the waves in anger, so that they reared up like hills. And we, standing on the shore, heard the evil roaring of the waves, which threw themselves one upon the other, like unto Leviathan, which smiteth with his tail. And our hearts were like water, with fear for the fate of our rabbi and the other disciples. And the women came out with lamps, and we waited on the shore. Then of a sudden we heard the voices of men from the night, and a crying, Hosanna! Save us! And there was silence, as if a great sword had cut off the heads of the waves, and made them to lie down. And from the night there cometh forth all calmly a ship, and our Rabbi steppeth in his white garments upon the land, and there follow him Simon Bar-Jonah and the brothers Zebedee, and their garments are torn upon their bodies by the arrows of the storm, and their hair is wild, their beards are blown about, and they are drenched in water from head to foot. And Simon, with hands stretched forth and eyes burning, crieth unto us, and we hear in his voice the beating of his heart. Hear now, and see what God hath done with us. We were upon the sea in our boats, and when we were in the midst of the water, a storm came. It came on a sudden, so that, or ever we knew it, we were encircled by high waves, as by the wild beasts of the field, and demons and evil spirits rode upon them as in a fever. And the waves opened their mouths and thought to swallow us. And we looked to our Rabbi, that he might save us from destruction. And we saw that our Rabbi slept on the deck of the ship, for he was weary with his holy work, and had leaned his head against the ship, and he slept. And his head was upon his right hand, his body was covered with his garment, and we watched him as he breathed. Then there came a mighty wave, and smote us, and the ship stood on end, and the rudder was broken, and the boards of the ship groaned under the blows of the waves. And we cried, Rabbi, Rabbi, hearest thou not this tumult? Seest thou not our terror? Have compassion on thy people, which followed thy footsteps even into the midst of the stormy sea. And he awoke and looked on us with awakening eyes, and said, O ye of little faith! And like unto a lord who reproveth his dogs that they molest his beloved guests, so he reproved the waves, and they were submissive, and bowed their heads at his feet, and lay there. And we passed on, as the Jews passed on through the Red Sea. And when we heard what Simon Bar-Jonah had told us, we lifted our hands to heaven, and praised our Father that dwelleth there, for the kindness he had shown unto us. And the terror of our Rabbi fell upon us all. And those of us that had been of little faith melted for fear. And we came before our Rabbi in trembling and awe, and we scattered ashes on our head, and took off our shoes, and fell at his feet, and cried, Thou Holy One in Israel, woe unto us, that we have sinned against thee in our hearts. Forgive us, and thrust us not away from thy countenance. And he placed his hands upon us, and said, Arise, and be comforted. Your sins are forgiven, for nothing shall stand up against faith. And we were comforted, and our hearts were filled with certainty, and we said one to the other, Salvation standeth at the door. Blessed is he that hath lived to see it. And among those that begged forgiveness of our Rabbi was I, Judah Ish Kiriot.